Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert is a 1957 novel, and it has been a while since I first read it, and I remember being struck by the realism of it. I heard it as praised as throughout, like kind of unanimously, so praised as a staple of not just literary realism, but of just like overall literature. And it being something as really striking a nerve with a lot of people, myself included. And once I read it, I finally understood why exactly it has such an astounding effect on those who read it. It's even like well over like 150 odd years after its publication. It has it's definitely not well worn over its contributions to its insights into human psychology and romanticism. Ideal, the fact kind of prized the fantasies we tell ourselves and the way that we can, both characters of Charles Bovary and Emma Bovary, how we can see ourselves in both. I saw myself a little bit in both of them, in the fiery romantic kind of passion and the zeal for the next big thing, the next like the life outside. The grass is always greener on the other side, as cliched as that sounds. It strikes so very true for Emma. And she just gets enraptured in this world, and we have Charles over here as mild mannered and but realistic, and just very devoted, kind of very much of a. I thought it was similar to. I saw parallels to Camus' The Plague, of Dr. Rio, I think his name, and how he's not like, he's very, generous to the people he has. He's very generous to Emma and the people he's around, and the practice that he started. He's a family doctor. But I'm going to start from the beginning, though. And then I'll try to read some quotes from it. But Charles Bovary, it starts off right in his life of being a shy, kind of a clumsy man, doesn't have a lot of style, and he is as a teen, he becomes a medical or for public health service. So he's a medical officer. So the not Parisian, but the French term for that is officier de santé, which basically it just means an officer of medicine. So that's more of a military term, and that wasn't so uncommon during the time when medical doctors and were very in kind of married close to the arms, and like because of the kind of semi upheaval of Europe at the time, I guess, of in varying degrees too. It's like there might have been peacetime, and a lot of these kind of doctors, they would go into war, and there seemed to be some kind of conflict going on, and they would tend to people's wounds mainly. But then so I think what this officer de santé is basically for this public health service. So he is a very committed to not just his vocation that pays him decently, but he's very committed, even like almost carte blanche, just to the cause of helping others. And this symbolically, that's very, very much a reflection of Charles Bovary as a person. If you could the sum total is just committed to others. He is a very duty bound. He sees things as kind of as they are, like they just are. People need help, and that's what he's going. That's his calling. Charles so he ends up going to marrying, but he doesn't marry out of love. The first time he marries, so before Emma, there is a woman named Eloise Dubuc, and she is pretty. She's a older woman who's a widow, so she's a lonely woman. But his mother, as in Charles Bovary's mother, ends up pointing to her and saying, "Hey, listen, it might not be." And this is very much par for the course of the times of Excuse my enunciation. I'm a bit hungry, so I should have eaten before, but oh well. Anyway, but yes, the hoping I can find my footing here, but so Charles, his mother is like saying like, okay, so you may not have anything in common with this woman, but marrying her will prove handsome. You'll get a handsome salary, and you'll get kind of deeds to whatever of her property and her kind of livelihood. And so Eloise is kind of a shadow in this book. She kind of shows up, and then she quickly passes on because she's kind of spurns or prompts him to meet Emma. So he's visiting this farm, and he's tending to an owner's broken leg, and he's meets his patient's daughter named Emma Rouault. Emma Rouault, I think. Rouault. And in French, the T's and the anything, if it's in for luck, I think it's French. But if it's not in those terms, if it's a T, if it's a there's going to be. So I think that's the general rule of thumb. But so Emma Rouault that's her maiden name, is a very young, head in the clouds dreamer, impractical, but very, very just like has this effect with Charles Bovary. He falls head over heels with her because she's well dressed, she's stylish, and in some sense she's kind of everything that he's not. So it's a balancing out. He's this clumsy, kind of not really all that graceful. He's kind of somewhat skinny. He's described as kind of chronically just diffident. But Emma is she's stylish. She's pompous. She has this innocent, but at the same time not overdone. She's not like, she has an innocent, youthful beauty to her. So at this point, I'm not sure how old Charles is, but he's still kind of in the young, but he's not quite as young. He's still maybe 10 years older than, don't quote me on that, but than Emma. But they fall regardless. It's more so Charles that falls for Emma, not really the other way around. So again, you see a kind of this thing with this novel is that spoiler alert, so many people die. I just say that because it's not going to take away from the power of the ending, because the ending is so universally unanimously unspoilable. It's like it's untractably or intractably not able to be really ruined. So I think so. But as long as you get the kind of main idea and the main drift is, but yeah, there's so many people. So another thing I've noticed is like the kind of exchange between characters. So you have Emma, who is in a similar sense as in the way that Charles was not really attracted to Eloise, but he's very, very much attracted to Emma, but Emma's not really reciprocating that. So you have the dynamics between relationships is, it's not like, it's because of the times, very much kind of par for the course. It's definitely something that is a commonality of what happened in the days, like privations, all these things. Women were kind of seen as some of them were seen as little more than just kind of property. Like it's the way, but like the way people marry or out of what's the word? Convenience. That's a big thing. Convenience. But we'll return back to the plot. And so basically, they become, after meeting each other shortly, they, Eloise dies first. I think I mentioned that. She passes on was kind of in the cards, because she wasn't, very young, and she was no spring chicken. She was kind of already kind of entering into old age and was like already kind of susceptible to illnesses. So she and not to mention tuberculosis was the bane of everybody's existence every day. It was the romantic kind of Susan Sontag had a great book, an essay on AIDS and the AIDS epidemic, and a metaphor of illness, and how that, and she mentions as kind of a staple as one of the main kind of things of the romantic movement, even as far back as the early to mid 1900s, really, was the tuberculosis and how that kind of was promulgated, or how it was so prevalent to the point of something that people almost envied having as a way of, as Byron says, I think said something to the effect of dying that romantic kind of enviable death of tuberculosis, because it was a way of going out with a interesting kind of bang almost for to woo the ladies, I guess, one last time. But anyway, so this popular kind of so after Eloise passes on, Charles waits a little bit of time before tying the knot with Emma, and again, he's a good guy at heart. He's not like rushing into there, and he's not a selfish guy. He's not gonna just like creep people out by instantly jumping on him. So you get an idea of his character. Emma eventually finds this domestic married life very tedious, very dull. She finds it so exhausting because while she agreed to it technically, she didn't do so out of an actual passion. She always knew that she had this affinity for the popular kind of romance books of her day that always, again, going back to that, the Byron, and, I'm not sure exactly what her taste was, and I'm not sure exactly what, off the top of my head, the romantic kind of poets or of France of the day, but that were popular in her, privy to her, or that she was privy to, but she had a very unrealistic, misguided, but kind of a little pure at heart kind of aspect to her of just being very guileless in one sense, but on the other hand, very just kind of immature, just even for a young woman. So, but they basically, Charles is very understanding of her needs and actually moves her to a city out of the rural area to this town called Yonville. So it's a kind of a richly kind of fecund place for the market. So it's like a nice place where she's Emma kind of gets a back in a good mood again as she gives birth to a daughter. That's a little bit of a mix up there. The daughter's name is Berth, as in Bertha or something. But it's just that I was confused because it gives birth to Berth. So just want to at least address the misnomer, I guess. So now at this point, the coming kind of longing for Emma to kind of have a change of scenery in the next big thing and what's going on the next or around the corner, is because she has her head filled with these romance books, and you can't blame her too, because of like maybe the way she might have been pampered by her parents. She came from a background that kind of lent itself to this kind of livelihood, or this kind of this always longing to have the next big thing, and this is similar to the thing that Balzac also Honoré de Balzac, de Balzac, addressed as well, very much and very powerfully as well, even a little bit earlier in the time. So this literary realism of just too that so but is she so she's looking to so they're living in this market town, and after giving birth, she finds that there's a man named Leon. So he is a law student who also has a affinity for the same kind of books that Emma has. So they have a shared kind of mutual understanding of the kind of the romantic kind of appeal to romance, I guess. I'm butchering that, but that's how they both kind of bond over that. But eventually they kind of go their separate ways, and it's not because there's not an attraction there, but it's because of just kind of the circumstantial kind of the changing tides in their different lives too. Like Leon's kind of going to continue his law degree, and he's trying to kind of study that, and he's trying to put away, I think in some sense that he's like, it's been a while, but I think he might have been a little bit disagreeing with Emma on the account of of maybe reading a little bit too much into these ideals of like merriment and of a sensual love, of like that kind of constant kind of looking for something new. And so he goes to Paris, but that's not the end of him. So after that, Emma finds there's a landowner named Rudolf Bullinger, and he is a kind of a tempestuous but very not on, but also capable of a kind of a romantic and intimate feelings. He's kind of almost a bit of a man's man. I get the sense of Rudolph, but they end up having for 4 long years. I forgot how long that was. The interim of how long they carry on this affair, and she constantly kind of not reminisces, but constantly is trying to convince him to run away with her so that he can so that they can continue their relationship and even get married. But you'll see a kind of thing here, because it's like Emma is like, even if like you get the sense that when it comes down to it, each and every single thing is a ticking time bomb of like a pre-disposed or a pre kind of packaged, parceled up disaster waiting to happen. But in more specifically, it's this idea that Flaubert so eloquently, yet at the same time kind of also it's almost like a rude awakening in some sense. But the way that he's able to address this idea of wanting something that's very much in someone's grasp, but that as soon as you get it, you're still dissatisfied. And I have not read another author who so succinctly and meaningfully paints that picture, other than maybe Dostoevsky or Anna Karenina, or Tolstoy's, and especially in Anna Karenina, of the affair that Karenina has, and end up jumping in front of a train track, and the ill-fated suicide, and the there's so much ill-fatedness in all this stuff that's just inscribed on these books, because they're so awesome. That's like such a 10 such a cheap word to use, but it's so, all these books kind of share that quality of and also because they're not so much apart from each other just in the year, and they weren't obviously fresh contemporaries, but they were definitely I guess Flaubert was kind of in 1857. This was about like the kind of right when Dostoevsky was about to kind of publish his magnum opuses of The Idiot was in the 1860s, I believe. So, but yeah, so so what happens is, because Rudolph rejects Emma and kind of writes off her dreams as kind of wishy-washy, nebulous, kind of childish infatuation, she is so greatly shocked and like she's like so shocked that she becomes sick. This is another thing I noticed too with these kind of books of women, or not just women who are so frail, but maybe highly sensitive women like Emma especially. But I've seen this in other books too, or just depicted in general, of this idea. I don't know if this is in Bronte's stuff, Charlotte Bronte, sorry. But this idea of being so heartbroken that you fall sick. It's a weirdly common thing for the time of like the Victorian or like pre-Victorian or Regency area especially too. But I thought there was an interesting kind of thing. But anyway, so after that kind of doesn't falls apart, she recovers eventually, and I'm just gonna check to see if this is recording, because okay, cool. We'll try to tie this up. So she and her husband Charles go to an opera, and they this is in the town of Rouen. So because of this, there's also a kind of vacillation, or kind of an oscillation, that Emma finds herself in the book, of her going back and forth to religion, namely a kind of a Judeo-Christian, I'm assuming, kind of sect, although don't necessarily, that's not 100% sure of that, but I think there's this kind of going back and forth between extremes, and one extreme is being kind of a nunnery kind of novitiate, kind of like zeal for like religion, and just hoping that God will, and all these reparations and all these different things for her kind of her self kind of loathing for her childishness, I guess. And then on the other hand, you have her very unwieldy, super passionate kind of, kind of falling into the arms of this man, being totally taken by them, and just being immersed in this intimacy. But at the same time, it's like, that this oscillation between extremes, just a very common thing for Emma's life, and in the sense that there's the universal in that too. Like, it's like the romantic ideal. That's why what makes Flaubert and what makes Balzac as well, all these great authors so great, is this ability to, it sounds a bit cliched or reductive, but the mastery over the universal and the particular. So in one sense, Emma Bovary is a very unique, particular character. She has her flaws. She has very particular interests and hobbies and traits. And I'm not saying Flaubert is the first person who made this, so obviously not. But he's done it really, really, really well, brilliantly. But on the other hand, there's a universal Emma Bovary. So the universal is this all-encompassing, every single man or woman both who is a diehard romantic of that era, or in general. It's like the archetypal tying, the tabula rasa kind of everybody, this imagistic kind of symbolism of every single diehard, head in the clouds daydreamer. So that's kind of an interesting kind of thing. But she's very human at the same time. So it's like it's not like any of this is like meant to be cartoonish, but in the sense that Dostoevsky, maybe on his flaw is that he brings a little bit of those sentiments almost to the point of, sentimentality. It's like he brings those, but he also says something effective of saying that he brings all those things, whether it's the religious aspects to its extreme, and then on one hand he brings the violence in his novel will be brought to its extreme. It'll just be like, it will be plain, all the way out to the murder of, Raskolnikov and Crime and Punishment, or any of the other murders in Demons and the Possessed. So anyway, but that's a diversion, I think. But anyway, this idea of she's a very realistic character in the sense that, yes, she goes to extremes and radical back and forth, but she is very much. But then again, what human doesn't? Like, what one of us doesn't have at least the seeds of those kinds of hopeless, kind of romantic, kind of head in the clouds. I keep going back to those same epithets, but so after her and her husband kind of reunite together at the opera, and she's like kind of beyond Rudolph at this point and kind of over him, she is an awakening. She has another kind of enlightenment of after this opera, of like, again, this is like very much kind of for the time. It's like very much a common thing for the time of the power of opera, like to actually immerse yourself in that experience in truly, because for the time it might have been the TV shows and the media of entertainment for that time was the opera, and a lot of the time the live kind of performances. So after she ends up going to seeing Leon again. So this is kind of meeting up again, and they finally they culminate their affair into a passionate kind of tumultuous, but very much kind of an expected kind of trajectory of events that the two of them would take. So this time he's like all in on it, like totally infatuated, head over heels with Emma, and Leon and her go about trying to get all these different luxuries and goods and stuff, and he's pampering her, and she ends up buying this credit merchant of the time, was called Luro, I think. Luir, I think. I'm butchering that word. But they have the power of attorney over this estate, so Charles Bovary's estate. So basically, whatever she's getting, she wants to get any luxury goods she can get on his behalf. So it's very much like she's like going all in on this lifestyle of like buying every last pampering kind of good or what's the word, everything imaginable, pretty much any kind of material possession and little knick-knack and book that you can imagine. And those were no small penny back in the day either, so I'd imagine like to get a book in print was like pretty expensive. So she's like just going all in, but now she exhausts all her things, and then she's very desperate. She goes into just complete desperation, knowing that she's so in debt that she goes to her family, and she's like all her friends, and she's like they all say that, like they all deny her. So in the final fit of despair, she ends up swallowing a bunch of arsenic capsules, and dies a very brutal, agonizing, grueling death. And this is one of the most powerful, going back to realism, but just like gritty, so grittily realistic. Like the way it's described, it's not like he's morbid or disgusting or bleak for its own sake, but it's bleak to paint a picture of what the passions when it's wielded or aimed in aimless rather, but when it's aimed in this direction can summate when it what it can I'm lost for words, result in. And it can sometimes result in this, or in the Sorrows of Young Werther too. It's a similar kind of thing of him not getting his love at the end of the day, so he ends up committing suicide. The same thing for a number of different real life romantics too. Whether it's Heinrich von Kleist with the murder suicide of his own, I can't remember her name. Was it Henrietta? I think his. I've only read one of his things, but I haven't read his poetry yet. But I have read Michael Kohlhaas. I'm not sure if I reviewed that yet. Anyway, but the idea of the romantic kind of this capacity for like disaster is in all romantic kind of. It's a testament. It's a cautionary tale of like, this is what can happen if this is like taken way off out of hand, or and it's not like that. It's like it's not like, oh, look at old dumb little young Emma Bovary. It's not like it's not at her expense. It's not like we're trying to demean her, belittle her. It's like a complete human thing. I feel human. I feel an empathy. It's like this vast empathy for that I'm sure Flaubert had for Emma Bovary. Otherwise, he wouldn't paint such a particularly for a woman who he could have easily just been like, screw this lady. Like he could have just been like screw Emma Bovary. She's like selfish. She's narcissistic, but instead he has like this such a like a tender like affection for her. Like he's like he sees a bit of himself perhaps in her too, and he's like sees a bit of everybody, of the character archetype of Emma Bovary. And after this, Charles is completely heartbroken, obviously. He ends up stopping his practice, ends up raising his little daughter, the daughter they have birth, and ends up eventually, he dies because at this point he's advanced enough in his years, I guess, and eventually it could even be insinuated that the heartbreak too with him. Okay, there's an obvious continuity issue here. I'm just finishing up Madame Bovary. I did try, it only recently occurred to me that when I was filming this originally a few days ago, the battery died, of course, which is probably the most kind of Occam's razor, kind of the not the least likeliest, but the most likeliest thing that will happen, because that's pretty much the given whatever. It's never the like anything else, but it's always the battery dying on this camera. but I do want to make sure that I tied it up a little bit because there was, obviously there's spoilers in this, but I don't think that takes away from the power of the whole book. So I think I left off when Charles is completely heartbroken over Emma, his wife, and after her suicide from like this arsenic poisoning that she takes these little these capsules, and he's like completely just, he just goes completely like in a grief and total despondency mode, and he's like looking for, and he never quite feels. It's kind of like he almost, that kind of ends up being the death of him because he's like kind of, that it's bothering him so much that, because he loved her so much that he was, and he felt like she was not the one that got away, but in the sense that he failed her, and that he feels like a little bit like guilty for that. But maybe I'm reading into it too much. But maybe he just feel that way regardless of. But so, yeah, he stops his practice as a doctor, and then he ends up selling everything he owns, and then goes off and. His young daughter Berth is he goes onto the care of his grandmother, I think, and then from that point on they they live in kind of a poor kind of childhood, and because of the she sends him off to this aunt who's not really all that well off, and it's none of this is a happy meal. Like it's like it feels like everybody dies in this. It's like everybody dies from either grief or heartache, and that's no less of a reason to read it, because it's like, despite the kind of bleak attitude, and as the author Gustave Flaubert was actually not a nihilist, but he was personally opposed to the idea of childbirth. Like I don't think of him as quite like a pessimist in the same vein as like a David Benatar, who is just like, no, like, do not bring Charles. I think that, as I don't know too much about Benatar's philosophy. I haven't taken the time to read him, but I have listened to some interviews and debates, I guess, over the years. But so I'm not really too sure on what was a good honest reflection of his views. But I do know that Benatar he seems to have a more disposed towards like this as a prescriptive way, as like saying like this is the like pleasure and pain. It's like infinite pleasure and pain, and the whole like world of there's a thought experiment, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like infinite suffering if you have like a maximum happiness for every single one of everyone in the world, and then versus like everybody's like what's suffering and well off. It kind of shows that this utilitarian mindset toward pleasure and pain being the only kind of metrics of life are quite flawed, I think. But it's called the something. It's the repugnant conclusion, I believe it's called, because and I'm not saying necessarily that Benatar believes it, but it's like I think Flaubert was different in the sense that it was a personal kind of approach that he had towards life, and he said, I just believe that I don't want to bring children in this world, and there's been other authors and stuff, of great authors of celebrated status, who have said echoed him through both kind of in a metafictional way that maybe I think Horace, I don't know if it might have been Machado de Assis, one of the Latin kind of writers, but kind of. Yeah, Flaubert has a great status as, he's like a kind of a, he that very mumuch makes sense to me, because that you see that in his writing, not in the sense of like he hates having kids or anything like that. He sees it as maybe extraneous suffering. Like he doesn't want to bring people, especially in the days of tuberculosis, and when it seemed like everybody was getting TB and everybody was kind of I might have already mentioned. Did I mention Susan Sontag's essay on that? If I haven't, then I guess I'll mention it a little bit. Delve a little bit into, what she was talking about, the romantic kind of death being an enviable one, and AIDS as a metaphor too. That was her whole thing that she was talking about, because that was kind of a corollary or a post kind of script to the original one, because there were two separate essays at two different times. But anyway, so yeah, this I think I forgot to mention that the book concludes with the one of the other kind of medical worker guys taking Homois, who was kind of mentioned earlier, but he was kind of like a character that was almost a little bit to be written off a little bit, not entirely, just kind of not really all that impressive, maybe just not really remarkable. But hey, he takes on over Charles Bovary's medical work, and then he kind of follows in his footsteps, and he kind of makes a name for himself, and so it does end on a kind of on a note of not total disregard for, or not in a total kind of depressing note, but there's a bit of hope in that. But yeah, that is pretty much all I have for Madame Bovary. I definitely recommend it. It's not for the faint of heart. But then again, I wouldn't be talking about it if I myself didn't pick it up and didn't glean something from it. And it's it's not too long of a book. It's about probably 300 to 400 pages. I had it somewhere. I can't find the original copy I had. There's probably been mixed up and stuff, and because there's so many different layers to how many books I've accrued over the years, and some of them I've given to friends, and some of them I've kind of just put in my parents' library to kind of stow away for a little bit. So it's kind of my lack of I don't know, organizational skills, I guess, when it comes to that. But yeah, so that is all I have for this book, and yeah, let me know what you think if you have any comments on that, and I will see you in the next one. So at least that recorded. Cool.